Decisions, decisions. Should you go to Cuba or Mexico? I'm going to give you my thoughts in this video. Hi everybody, I'm Mike Vondruska with Mike's Mexico Adventures. Thank you for watching. Let's first talk about Cuba, the pros and cons, and then we're going to talk about Mexico. Cuba first. Full disclosure, I have not traveled to Cuba yet, so I haven't been there. It's on my list, but I haven't been there yet. However, I have talked with quite a few people who have been there. I've also found a lot of information about Cuba from my travel agent friends who book people to Cuba, and I've done my due diligence by watching many YouTube videos that people have made about their travels to Cuba. Recent travels, 2016, 2017. So, no, I haven't been there, but I have kind of an idea of what's going on there based on all the information I've gathered. And if you've been to Cuba, please make a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Okay, Cuba. First of all, it's a little bit bigger than the size of the state of Tennessee, to give you an idea. It's about 770 miles long, and only at its widest width is 119 miles, and it can get as skinny as 19 miles. And so it's very narrow and long. Now, 770 miles long, that means that some of you who are like trying to plan your trips and you're talking to travel agents, let's say, and you're saying, oh, I want to go to Havana and I want to go here and there and there. Well, in the time frame you have, it probably isn't going to happen because these are long distance jumps. A lot of time in the car, and you're not going to want to do that. Talk to a travel agent or really make sure you have your information straight, because you don't want to get there and go, yikes, there's no way. It's like planning a trip to the United States and saying, you know, I want to go to Chicago, but while I'm in Chicago, I'm also going to go to Knoxville, Tennessee, and I'm going to go to Atlanta. Hey, Atlanta is a little over 700 miles away from Chicago. Okay, get the idea? Also, you're not the first. If you're coming from the United States, you don't think that you're the first person to ever go there just because you can go there. All right, there's been a restriction of people from the United States going to Cuba. There has not been any restrictions. People from Canada, from Mexico, from South America, from Europe, from other parts of the world, there's no restrictions. They've been going to Cuba for decades. And so you are not the first person to go. They've been hosting tours forever. 2016, give you an idea, 4 million people went to visit Cuba. Divide that by 12 months, it's like, 333,000 people there any given month. Of course, it doesn't work that way, but you get the idea. So that's a lot of people, all right? The population of Cuba is about roughly 11.5 million. So those are the parameters of the place. Now let's talk about what you can see, what you can do. This is what I found from watching many YouTube videos. Number one is internet. It's really terrible. It's not free. You gotta buy a card by the hour. One person said it was $6.50 per hour to use it, and then again, it may work, it may not work. And also, since everybody's trying to get on the internet, there's long lines to buy these cards. So don't think that you're gonna go to Cuba and take those really nice selfies and then send them off to your friends on Facebook right away. It may not happen. May not happen. Also, customer service. I guess it's not that great there. Enough said. The other thing is the food. From what I hear, it's just kind of food. It's nothing great. If you're a foodie, that's not the place to go. Hotels are expensive, I heard. It's better to do an Airbnb, and that's Cuba, okay? So, and also it's hard to get to. If you're coming from the United States, there are like 12 different categories that you need to qualify for. You just can't say, oh, you know, I just want to go and visit Cuba. I ain't gonna cut it. You gotta have a reason for going there. It's kind of like Coors beer. Remember Coors beer? It's still around. In the mid-70s, I went to college in Illinois, and I remember one winter I was going to take a ski trip. I was going to go skiing to Colorado, and when word got out among my friends and acquaintances on campus, oh my gosh, everybody was coming up like, hey, you know, if I give you money, could you bring like a 12-pack back of Coors beer? Hey, could you bring a case? Hey. Everybody wanted me to bring Coors beer back. Why? Because back in the 70s, it was only distributed in stores west of the Mississippi, not east. And so there was this mystique about Coors beer. Oh yeah. What people can't have, they want. And that was the case with Coors beer. Today, you can find Coors beer, you know, among all the other beers on the shelf. And the thing is, it's nothing that special. I don't know if it was that much better before. It was just the fact that you couldn't get it. Kind of the same with the fact that now people from the US can go to Cuba. Oh, yeah, you know. But again, you're not going to be the first people to go there. Millions and millions of people have been there before you. I understand too, if you bring US dollars and you exchange it, the US dollar is less than the Cuban currency. Plus, they charge you a 10% fee for doing the exchange, so make sure you know what you're getting into. I don't know anything about the geographic beauty of Cuba other than the fact that people tell me the beaches are nice. Well, there are nice beaches all over the place. So, okay, great. It's a tropical beach, just like in the Caribbean, in Mexico, and Miami, and yeah, you name it. As far as the rest of the country, nobody mentioned anything about the geographic beauty of it. All it was, hey, look at these old cars, and look at me smoking this Cuban cigar. In a nutshell, that's Cuba. Let me look at my notes. I have notes here. I was taking notes. Anything else? People also said that the locals are warm and friendly. Latin countries, generally, that's the case. And also, family-oriented, you know, cohesiveness is a family. You can find that in other Latin countries, Mexico as well. All right, I think that's, yeah. Okay, let's talk about Mexico now. This is a place that I really know. I've been going to Mexico for almost 20 years. I have traveled all throughout the country. I've been to almost every state. Yes, there are states in Mexico, 32 of them. I've been to 25. So, I've been everywhere. I have to tell you, and this is something that's not all that known about Mexico, and that is there are over 60 different cultures living in Mexico, indigenous cultures. That means there's over 60 different languages, separate, completely different languages. In a lot of areas, Spanish is not the preferred language or main language that's spoken. It's one of these other languages. One travel writer from a newspaper in California one time, who had just completed a trip to different areas of Mexico, said going from state to state, Mexico states, was like going to a different country. Different costumes, different customs, different history, everything. I'll give you some examples. There's a little town that's in the state of Michoacan, and there's a big lake there called Lake Pátzcuaro, and on the northeast side of Lake Pátzcuaro is a town called Santa Fe. And once you get through the stone wall that goes around it, it was almost like being transformed into a different century, into a different country than the country of Mexico. Everybody was in traditional dress. Didn't hear any Spanish. They were speaking Purépecha. Really, really interesting. Here's another example. There's a little village that's just east of the city of Oaxaca, in the state of Oaxaca. It's called San Miguel de Valle. I was there one time. Oh my goodness. Again, it's a small little pueblo, traditional dress. They weren't speaking Spanish, they were speaking Zapotec. Again, I felt like I was in a different country other than Mexico. And you will find that in different areas. And so, the cultural diversity is great. Now, of course, true, the country of Mexico is much bigger than Cuba. The country of Mexico is the size of Western Europe. And yet, when you ask or you say the word Mexico to people from the United States, and this was an example that was used by a friend of mine who runs another tour company with tours through Mexico. He said, people in the United States, when they hear Mexico, they think to themselves, margaritas on a beach, because of all the advertisements and everything. And so they think Mexico is just a place to go on the beach, to the resorts, to Cancun and Playa del Carmen and Puerto Vallarta and Cabo San Lucas. Just places on the beach. There's so much more to Mexico. Interesting enough, he also said that if you were to ask someone from Europe or someone from, let's say, Australia, what comes to your mind when you hear the word Mexico? And you know what they think? Exotic. Yeah, I mentioned that to people here in the United States, and they're like, what are you talking about, exotic? I mean, you know, it's margaritas on the beach, man. Hey, let's party, party, party. It's what you don't know. And there's so much in Mexico that's so interesting. Not to mention the geographic diversity from the white Caribbean sand beaches that you do see in Cancun to the tropical rainforests of Chiapas and Veracruz and San Luis Potosí to the high plateau areas such as Mexico City. Mexico City in December, January, February, it's cold. You better bring a coat and hat and gloves. You know, it's not tropical. They're at like some 7,000 foot altitude. There are mountains in Mexico that has snow. There's one that has a glacier. I mean, there are deserts in Mexico. It's just so diverse, which is great. Not to mention all the festivals and that as well. Mexico has a lot to offer, and yet people from the United States think margaritas on the beach. And they think of Cuba as exotic. Why? Because they couldn't go there, and now they can. But the central interior part of Mexico was always open. But it's just not being advertised as much as the contrived, put-together tourism places such as Ixtapa, such as Cancun. Those areas were built specifically just for tourism. Ixtapa. You know how many Mexicans live in the city of Ixtapa? This many. None. They all live in a little community just outside that was built specifically for the workers, and they bus them in every morning to work at the hotels. It's not Mexico. They built it up. They have like 26 hotels, and that's it. And at night, unless you're working overnight, you go back to your community. So those are tourist areas, yeah. But those are the ones that we always see on television and commercials. And yet, there's so much more to Mexico. So, you want to go to Cuba, you want to go to Mexico. Personally, go to both. But if you come to Mexico, don't just go to the Cancuns, okay, area. Those kinds of we call them sun and sand locations. Go and really explore it. And yeah, someone's gonna be watching this video going, oh, but it's so dangerous in Mexico. I live in Chicago. It's the end of November 2017. I just read in the Chicago Tribune already in the city of Chicago, 600 homicides have occurred since January 1st of this year in Chicago. I think it's the #1 murder capital city in the United States. And yet, I'm not fearing for my life. Now, I live in the suburbs, but the fact of the matter is, it's just in a particular area of Chicago, and it's just between, you know, it has to do with drugs, and it has to do with gang rivalries. And it's the same in Mexico. It has to do with gang rivalries there, cartels, and it has to do with drugs and fighting the police who are fighting them. And, you know, as far as tourists being targeted, it's not happening. I have been traveling through Mexico, like I said, for many, 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 many years, and I have to tell you, never, ever, once have I felt unsafe. So, enough said. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, a like, and if you want want to stay in touch, every week, usually on Sundays, I put out another video. As they say in Spanish, whether you're in Cuba or in Mexico,